Hi, I'm Ted Wolf, presented by Guidewise. Welcome to the Implementors podcast, where we connect you to the stories and insights of people who have mastered implementation. Why? Because ideas are easy, but implementation is hard. Join us as we uncover the secrets of successful implementation so you can conquer your implementation struggles. Today on the Implementors podcast, we have the privilege of welcoming Dr. Marc Brackett, the founding director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence and a professor in the Child Studies Center at Yale University. Marc is a leading authority on how emotions shape learning, decision-making, relationships, and overall well-being. He has spent decades pioneering research that bridges science, practice, helping individuals, schools, and organizations harness emotional intelligence as a driver for better performance and healthier cultures. He's the author of the groundbreaking book, Permission to Feel, which has transformed how educators, business leaders, and parents think about emotions and emotional skills, along with his most recent publication, Dealing with Feeling, which provides readers with proven strategies for using your emotions to create the life you want to live. Marc's mission is simple but profound: to give people the permission, skills, and science they need to use emotions wisely and live with greater purpose, resilience, and connection. In this conversation, we'll cover topics such as why emotional intelligence is a strategic advantage for leaders and teams today, the practical power of the ruler framework in schools and organizations, the deeper meaning of permission to feel and its impact on leadership and culture, how to apply emotional intelligence to navigate change, disruption, and burnout, and the intersection of emotional intelligence and AI, why human skills are more valuable than ever. So, Marc, welcome to the Implementors podcast.
Thank you for having me. It was hard to listen to my bio, but I'm going
to... You earned every bit of it. I know that. Marc, I want to start off with my business education through college and business. We were always told to eliminate emotions, just make business decisions. It seems like today we're telling everybody to do the opposite. Why the change?
Well, I think, this idea of how emotions influence thinking and decisions is a big one. And I think historically we saw emotions as interference. They were disruptive to quality thinking and performance. And now the research shows otherwise, that when we can use our emotions wisely, when we're emotionally intelligent, actually it helps us make better decisions and have better relationships and so on. So it's really just about understanding how the emotion system works. And just to put it into even deeper perspective, whether you're, conscious of it or not, if you're in the business world, let's say you're in a board meeting, everybody's emotions are at the table. They're always there. You can't check your emotions at the door. So why not use them wisely to achieve your goals as opposed to trying to suppress them or deny them?
And how do you explain that to somebody who hasn't, I'll say, become consciously aware of their emotions? It's like explaining a sunset to someone who's blind.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, I meet a lot of business people in my career, and there's it's like a normal distribution. Some people are like, where have you been all my life? And other people are like, get out of my face. And I think the issue with a lot of people in the business world and managers and leaders is that they actually don't know what they don't know because they never had an emotion education. And so when you ask questions, around, for example, I'll give you one of my favorites. I was doing it. I teach at the business school at Yale. It's called the School of Management. And I have a bunch of engineers coming in from a big company. And I do a thing in my presentation where I say, what's the difference between anxiety, stress, pressure, and fear? And they look at me like, really? Like, who cares? And I'm not kidding. Like, I'm asking you a serious question here. Go back to your table groups. You got 5 minutes to define these 4 concepts: anxiety, stress, pressure, fear. And, reluctantly they go and do it. And then they come back and usually the first response is, well, Professor Brackett, there is no difference. And I'm like, this is not a trick question. Go back to your tables. Like, you're getting on my nerves now. Just do what the professor tells you to do. So anyhow, they come back and finally, we'll get to it, and maybe I'll have to give them the answer if they don't get it. And I say, well, anxiety is about uncertainty. Stress is about having too many demands and not enough resources. Pressure is when something at stake is dependent upon your behavior. And fear is about impending danger. And they kind of roll their eyes a little bit and like, okay, so who cares? I say, well, now go back to your groups again. And your job is to tell me why that matters. And, sometimes it goes well, sometimes it doesn't go well. But in the end, because I don't want to take you through my whole class right now, we start realizing, oh, well, when you're accurate at naming precisely how you're feeling, it's a pathway to strategizing with those feelings. Because anxiety, if your brain is, oh my gosh, the future's uncertain. I remember when the pandemic hit and my university shut down and I had 50 staff members all working on Zoom and working from homes. It was anxiety ridden, like, when are we going back? And I remember thinking to myself, Mark, you're not the president of the university. You're not the CDC. And so you're going to have to just like live with this uncertainty. And my point of saying that to you is that the strategy that I used to manage my anxiety was quite different. I'm a psychologist. At the same time, all this crazy stuff was happening in the world. I'm getting thousands of emails from universities and people and schools like, we're having breakdowns. We're freaking out. Come help us. That was stress for me because I had too many things coming at me and I didn't have the resources to handle it all. And so the strategy for managing stress, really different for anxiety. And at that point, some people start, the light bulb starts going off. Oh, maybe this guy has something interesting to teach me.
So you mentioned 4 emotions: anxiety, stress, pressure, and fear. They all trigger different behaviors.
Yes.
Now, let's talk a little bit about your new book, Dealing with Feeling and Emotional Regulation. How do you get people to take anxiety and break down the belief behind anxiety? Because those 2 things, I believe, and the meaning you give to events is what's going to trigger your behavior. Could you explain a little bit of that, about that?
Yeah, can I use you as my little guinea pig?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. So do you ever get anxious?
Absolutely.
Tell me something that you've been anxious about over the last year or so.
Cash flow, paying the bills, growing the business, uncertainty, not knowing what technology to use, not knowing how to perhaps explain the offering that we have within the company can be very uncertain and a lot of anxiety.
Okay. That's interesting. So what I'm hearing is that the things that you're anxious about are things that matter to you. Does that resonate with you?
Absolutely.
So then anxiety is not such a bad thing because you're kind of worrying about the things that are meaningful to you and you want to make sure those things work out.
Absolutely. It makes me think back, okay, do I have a plan to address my anxiety? Meaning not the anxiety itself, but the stimulus that causes the anxiety, meaning better cash flow planning.
Yes.
Better evaluation of the product.
Exactly. So that anxiety is a signal that you probably need to focus on better planning. So in my thinking, that's a productive emotion because if you weren't anxious about it, you might let things go.
So how do you get people to get into the practice of thinking that way? Because that's a different approach to thinking.
It is. Well, I do things like I did with you. And so I think it's if you have an emotion coach, which is, my job today, I'm thinking, I'm listening to you. I know as a scientist of emotion that our feelings about our feelings actually are quite powerful. So if I come into the equation thinking, oh my God, anxiety is bad, it means I'm weak, which is why a lot of men don't talk about their anxiety because they have this mindset. Oh, people are going to think I'm weak. People are going to think I'm not strong enough, which is not true because everybody feels anxiety. It's a natural occurring emotion in the world. But somehow or another, we've brought up boys and men to think that if they talk about their anxiety, it means that they, are weak. And so, firstly, I'm a role model for it because I'm an anxious mess. I'm not a mess, but I
Join
am.
the club.
Yeah. And I remember, for example, even within our center, when the pandemic happened, I'm using that as an example. I remember we had our first Zoom meeting, which was so weird, right? Everybody's crazy at this point in time. And everybody's looking to Dr. Marc Brackett, the director of the center, to be like strong and resilient. And people were saying, well, how are you feeling, Mark? And I said to them, I'm really worried. This is a really freaking weird time. But here's what I'm doing. I am getting my exercise in. I am getting all the information I need about how to make the best choices to support our center. And so, do you see what I'm doing there? I'm admitting my true emotion, but I'm also demonstrating, as this whole book I wrote is about, how I'm dealing with my feelings. Like, what are the strategies I'm doing? So I can have the feeling, but not allow the feeling to have power over me.
Yeah.
And that to me is at the highest level of the work.
So that's kind of like freedom then.
Yeah.
You can then begin to, I'm going to say, pick and choose the emotional reaction or the emotions you want to feel and learn how to get yourself into that mindset of here's a better strategy, or just here's how I look at anxiety. I don't look at it as negative anymore, so I don't have to avoid it.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a little tricky. Sometimes emotions come, as we say, unbidden. We don't ask for all the emotions to happen to us. And sometimes that's good because, if you're in the middle of the street and something comes fast at you, you want to get that fear response to get the heck out of the way. But I think that we always have a choice, which some people don't like to hear, in how we respond to those emotions. Just because you're angry doesn't mean you have to throw things and yell and scream and, be a tyrant. That's learned. That's a learned response for all of us. We're not born with an area of our brain that says when we're angry, we yell, scream, and throw things. Somehow or another, we learned that growing up from our parents, from school, from television, and no one taught us otherwise. And so we've adapted that maladaptive way of dealing with feelings. My argument is that sometimes we have to unlearn those unhelpful strategies and find, a better way.
When you're talking to business executives, we'll say, as an example, what are some of the most common emotions that you see they are feeling today?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are anxious and stressed, and that's why I use that as an example, because I think they're not really sure how they're feeling. They just feel kind of angst and overwhelmed. Sometimes it's overwhelm, sometimes it's fear, sometimes it's anxiety. It could be, a bunch of things. Sometimes it's pressure from the shareholders, right, or the board. And I think understanding, that is important, because if it's the pressure from the board, that's a different kind of pathway versus, the anxiety about not knowing, what to do first or second or third, versus the stress that's coming in from all the inquiries, etc. So I think the first step is really, I'll call it radical self-awareness. And that's a big part of our teaching, is helping people to just, take a minute or a few seconds and just pause and just see if you can identify your feelings.
So let's say that the 4 stages of learning, the first one is unconscious incompetence. They've never had the training in emotional awareness. And I believe in your ruler, the first one is recognizing and identifying emotions. And then it goes down to, naming them. How do you get someone to associate this is the word and this is what it feels like? So I know, and I can always go back and say, oh, this is anger that I'm feeling.
Well, the way I like to think about it is that all emotions, firstly, are appraisals of our environment. And so I feel angry because I perceive an injustice. I feel disappointed because I have an unmet expectation. I feel joy because I'm accomplishing a goal. I feel content because I feel like everything is going really well and everything's kind of complete. That's an important piece. So the first step is you got to know the definitions of these concepts, because they're all concepts. Truthfully, they're made up words. I mean, we could call anger blah, 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 blah. You know, we just decided to have this word for anger. So I think build your vocabulary, understand why you're having the feeling is the first step.
How do we go about constructing an emotion, or is it just something that's, I'm going to say, there and it just comes up automatically?
It's a little bit of both. And so let's talk about what is an emotion. An emotion is mostly an automatic response to a stimulus. You know, if I said something cruel to you, you might be shocked, or you might get angry. Like, what is this guy doing on my podcast? Like, berating me. That would be weird, right? So something happens in the world that you appraise, and the appraisal process, oh, Mark is saying something that's really mean and cruel. Oh, Mark just gave me a compliment. Mark just scared the heck out of me by saying something really strange. And so we appraise that stimulus. And then when we do that appraisal process, it causes shifts in the way we think, in the way we feel on the inside, and the way we behave. But importantly, all of that is baked in our development and culture. And so it's an important piece, because we can't assume that everyone's going to feel the same way we do about the same things.
Yeah.
Just like we don't greet each other. I'm a martial artist, by the way. My other career is I teach a Korean martial art called Hapkido. And so I spend a lot of time running around teaching people how to, do the martial arts. And that my teacher is in a little town in South Korea. And so when I go to Korea, everybody bows to me, right? It's like, Mark's son, everybody bows. When I give a speech here in Connecticut, nobody bows to me. I don't even get eye contact barely here in Connecticut. It's not like, and then I go to Italy. We have a Center for Emotional Intelligence in Florence, Italy. And everybody's like, Marco, where have you been all my life? And I get kisses galore. And so I can approach, the way people greet me as the judge. Like, oh, wait a minute. Why aren't you greeting me with that Wall Street strong handshake? Because that's what I think is the right way. There's no right way. Yeah, all this stuff is baked in our culture, and my argument is that we have to be in learning mode constantly.
Yeah. Yeah. Now that I know you're also a martial artist and a doctor that knows emotional intelligence, you're the last person I want to piss off, let me tell you.
I got a 5th degree black belt, so look out.
Okay. Let's go back. You mentioned about decision-making in business.
Sure.
Somebody knows that when I'm angry, I probably shouldn't make decisions. How do they learn to understand how that emotion is influencing the criteria they're looking at to make that decision?
So what you said is important, and I'm going to throw out some caveats there too.
Mm-hmm.
You can make a good decision when you're angry.
Okay.
You just got to know that you're angry,
Mm-hmm.
and you got to know why you're angry, and then you have to have a strategy for dealing with the anger. And just because you dealt with the anger doesn't mean the anger went away. Mm-hmm. Like sometimes emotions linger; they become moods. Mm-hmm. So I think that's important. I've done research on this actually. And so let me give you a little bit of that study. So what we've done in research, and others have done it as well, is we do experiments where we randomly assign people to be in different mood states. And it's really easy to do, actually. You just have people reflect on things like, think about the best day at work. Think about the worst day at work. A day when everything was going great, like you felt like you could, you got the world on a string. And think about a day when nothing was going right. And write about it for 5 minutes. And they do that. They don't know why they're doing it, because that's part of the experimental design. And then we have some distractions, and then we give them something to do, like evaluate. In a teacher, I do work in schools, like a teacher evaluates a student essay. In the workplace, it could be, you're going to give feedback to this employee on this report. And we see, are there differences in the style and the way that people give feedback based on being randomly assigned to be in a good mood or a bad mood? And what we find, for example, in my research with schools, is that there's 1 to 2 full grade differences in the way the teacher will evaluate the same exact essay just based on the mood induction. And so that's scary, right? That says, oh my gosh, emotions, I'm not in control. I'm subconsciously, like, my emotions are influencing my judgment and my behavior, which is true.
Yeah.
However, if you ask the person to check in with their feelings in between the mood induction and the judgment, it wipes away the bias.
Okay. So,
do you see what I'm saying here?
Absolutely. How much time do they have to do that?
A few seconds. I mean, I wake up irritable. It just, I got the irritable gene in the morning. I don't get enough sleep usually, and I wake up and I want coffee, and I want to have coffee alone. And then I have to set my goals for the day, and if that doesn't go the way I want it to go, then I'm irritable. And oftentimes I'm rushed and I got to get into the office or I have meetings. And I'm now militant. I mean, it's a strong word, but I am militant about checking in with my emotions before I start an important task. So, for example, if I'm going into a brainstorming meeting with my team, before I open the door to the meeting or open the Zoom meeting, I will just take a deep breath and say, how you feeling? Oh, God, I'm so freaking irritable right now. Well, why are you irritable? Oh, because of that last meeting. Yeah. So you're angry at that person because of what they said and did. Yeah. So you're not really angry about going into this podcast recording. Oh, no, not at all. Okay, good. So then I can enter in with a clean slate. I can still feel the feeling I had about the past, but it won't have that influence.
Yeah. So you're kind of rethinking, evaluating, introspection, if you want to call it that, so you can identify, here's
Correct.
the emotions I'm feeling.
Attributing it to its cause. That's the key.
Yeah. Okay. Now, what's the place of feedback? Intrinsic feedback, extrinsic feedback. What's the place of that feedback, and how do you teach somebody to emotionally accept it, learn from it, versus repress it, avoid it, and get defensive over it?
Well, I think it's about mindset. So my mantra is feedback is a gift. And so I'm always open to feedback. My whole life is, feedback, to be honest with you, because I failed so many times in my career, and I've had so many people like, I don't like your program, crazy stuff has happened, as you can imagine. And so I think for me, it's about listening and it's about sifting, because you have to know where the feedback is coming from. I've had feedback that was more about the other person than really about my work. And so I think that's, you have to have that skill set of saying, oh, wait, my father had a lot of feedback for me. I was like, maybe if you had a PhD in emotional intelligence, you can get like, all right, Dad, I appreciate
that.
I appreciate your perspective. Have a great night. And he was a good guy, but sometimes his feedback was based on his own unmet needs versus the needs that I had.
Yeah.
I think in general, it's interesting when we give people our tests of emotional intelligence, because everybody thinks they're higher than they are. Right. So I always prepare people. I'm like, you might be surprised by your score on the emotional intelligence test. Where are you in terms of your openness to that? And, if people will say things like, I think I'm open, but I still know I'm really high. And I say, well, what if you're not? How are you going to handle it? Yeah. And I think those kinds of conversations are really important. Like actually saying, so if you're disappointed in your score, what's going to be your approach? Are you going to get defensive, or are you going to be kind of inquisitive?
Yeah. Well, if you stay in that growth mindset, you're going to be open to learning and feedback. And if I may just take a moment, I think you demonstrated an example of emotional intelligence when you spoke about your father. He gave you feedback. Thanks, Dad. Have a good night. You didn't get upset. You didn't react to it in a bad way. You took it in stride. You understood where the feedback was coming from and put it in its place. So that's great. Um,
I mean, it took me 20 years of therapy and a PhD in psychology to do that, but
you did it though, and that's what's
you
important.
know, work in progress.
Um, how do you how would you talk to an individual in business who has a fear of failure and they are in sales and they're getting rejection all the time? And rejection can be interpreted as fear or failure. How do you get them over that? How do you
Yeah.
let the past, I'm going to say bad interpretations of emotion, how do you let that baggage go?
It's funny, I have a podcast as well. It's very focused. It's a podcast that's called Dealing with Feeling,
Mhm.
that I interview people about emotional intelligence, and I interview experts, but I also interview famous people like Duff McKagan from Guns N' Roses and the singer Jewel and actors. And in this one interview with an actress, Emily Kinney, got famous from the Walking Dead show, we talked about rejection. And I love what she said. I said, how do you, she's like, Mark, let me tell you, like as an actress, where I'm at in my career, it's 99% auditions that get where I don't get the job. And I said, I don't know how do you do it? Like I have a lot more control kind of over my life in terms of I get to write the paper. I mean, I've gotten rejected for sure,
Mm.
but, gosh, not having control, like I want to play that part and you can't get it because the
Right?
casting director didn't like you. Um, she said, I made a decision in my life that I want to be an actor for the rest of my life. This is where my passion is. And so it doesn't not hurt when they say, this part is not going to you. But I realized somebody else got the part and I'm happy for them, which I thought is an interesting approach. And B, I walk away thinking, you know, it sucks, but in my line of work that I've chosen, I'm going to have to get a lot of rejections before I get the acceptances. And it's just a mindset.
Mhm.
I feel the feeling of rejection, and then I kind of like walk back home from the interview or the audition, and I just, think about it, and then I just drop it into the garbage pail, and I continue, and I just repeat. And that's just a process that I use to help me manage it. And I thought that was
Mhm.
pretty wise.
So you mentioned a word there that could be key. What's the role of purpose in helping you define the meaning of an emotion? You said that her purpose was, I want to act. I want to act. That's my life's work.
Yeah.
So I know I'm going to have to take rejection. That purpose probably, I'm asking, probably helped frame how she deals and manages with the emotion of rejection and
Yes.
loss, etc.
Yeah. It
How
does.
do you how do you get someone to incorporate that purpose into their life then?
Well, I'll tell you, I do it all the time because some of the work I've been doing has been politicized. All this weird stuff. Don't teach emotional intelligence in schools.
Really?
Totally. Um,
That's surprising.
yeah,
Disappointing.
it is very disappointing, and so I have to use a lot of the purpose stuff to keep going.
Yeah.
And so, actually, in my book, I talk a lot about the cognitive strategy, and that is actually about repurposing or finding purpose. And let me give you an example. So I was about to give a speech, um, I don't know, a while ago, and it was in a place where I was told, Mark, look out, they're gonna come after you. Like they're anti your work, and they're gonna these people are gonna be like throwing things at you on stage. I'm like, are you kidding me? And so because I'm a self saboteur, I went anyway.
Yeah.
Um,
Bring it on.
Bring it on, yeah. And I'm sitting at breakfast. Of course, I say that until I get there, right? And then I'm sitting at breakfast and I'm thinking to myself, Mark, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing this? This is ridiculous. You don't need this in your life. You got on a freaking plane and you're in an area you don't even want to be in. People aren't going to like you and you're going to be ridiculed. And then I said, okay, this was actually for 500 superintendents of schools. So 500. And I realized that they collectively reached millions of kids. And I have a
Yeah.
passion for getting my work into schools. So I just took a deep breath and I said, Mark, you know that you're freaking smart. You know that you can do this. You're going to present this stuff in a way that's going to get them on your bus. And you're going to leave here feeling amazing about yourself because you have gotten the people who you think are going to ridicule you to actually want to work with you.
Yeah.
And the truth behold, it worked. And so that's you go into finding your purpose and then you kind of operate through that lens. And I had to like literally go from the self-criticism to like the self-sabotaging kind of negative talk to like, Mark, that is not going to be helpful for getting on stage. You got to get out of that. What's your strategy? Go back to your purpose, go back to your meaning, and show up through that lens.
Yeah. So you have a podcast, and a good podcast is all about the guest, no question. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, but I'm also going to intersperse a few of my opinions. And I think number one, your work is invaluable. When I read your book and I saw the ruler framework, I thought this guy hit it. This guy hit it exactly.
Thank you.
How to start helping people become more human. And in a work environment, that's vital because you can't make decisions anymore. I hope people don't, where they just don't care about how they're impacting other people.
Yeah.
So my question to you is AI, artificial intelligence, everybody in business is talking about it. Everybody's fearful. Everybody's uncertain. And they see in the last 2 years how far it has come. And you can read Ted Shelton, you could read Ethan Mollick, you can read a lot of people. And it all comes down to, I believe, many of the things you're saying. And that is, in the future, we're going to have emotional intelligence to deal with all the uncertainty and the fast pace of change. And people fall into change fatigue. How can you get the message out there in your mind so that schools will develop future leaders, but right now we've got to go through this change? How do you see businesses who are really implementing emotional intelligence into their training for AI and the changes? How do you get that in front of them and they actually take it? What do you see them doing that's different?
Well, I'm waiting to see something different. What I'm seeing is a lot of money being invested into AI. I gave a keynote at this big conference. It's called ASU GSV. It's an ed tech conference, and I was just blown away by the hundreds, if not billions of dollars that people were investing in AI. And some of it for amazing things. I'm a big advocate for AI. Where I think it falls short is as a fixer for mental health challenges. Because I think what's happened with social media and technology, we have become more isolated. We're the loneliest planet we've ever been. The research on loneliness is skyrocketing in terms of how many people feel lonely, which is correlated with anxiety and depression. And so what we're trying to do is create AI, therapists who, which means that you're going to be alone interacting with a device, talking to it as a companion. Yeah. And the research, shows that, oftentimes the advice that AI gives us is really off. And I think that makes sense because no matter what, it's never going to be a sentient being. And so 2 things about that. One is, I think we have to, if I need AI, for example, if I'm going to have a meeting, like a difficult meeting, or I need help with having a difficult conversation. Okay, I can ask AI to give me some ideas for how I could frame the conversation. But the challenge is that then I go into the meeting, let's say with you, and I use this script that I got from AI, and you're like, thanks for your AI script, Mark. It's like, go blank yourself. You're full of blank, and and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait a minute, hold on, I got to go back to the chatbot to find out what to say and do. And so I think we need, and I just wrote a piece on this, I'm hoping gets published. that we need to invest in prevention.
Mm-hmm.
That the goal of this work is not to not do the AI work. Go for it. We need to develop these, systems to help do lots of different things. But let's teach people the skills they need to navigate their lives so that there's less money needed. My argument is that, and to give you an example, this one company that I read about, $100 million investment in terms of this new AI bot. And I did an analysis that for that $100 million, you could bring a program like mine to 12,500 schools and impact nearly 8 million kids.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of people's lives that you could fix and support.
Yeah.
And that's only one company. I mean,
yeah.
And
So tell me about some of the success stories that you've experienced going into schools, helping them understand emotional intelligence and being taught the importance of emotional intelligence.
That's I feel so blessed that way, because the name of our program at our Center for Emotional Intelligence is called Ruler, just like the skills. So the 5 skills of emotional intelligence, Ruler,
Mm-hmm.
and that's also the name of our model. And we're now in 5,000 schools across the United States and in other countries.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And we've impacted about 7 to 8 million kids' lives. The results are pretty remarkable. I have so many. I can give you a million anecdotes, but I'll just share with you the research. And what we know is that when you teach kids these skills, and importantly, the adults who are teaching kids and the adults who are raising kids, because truthfully, what we want are emotionally intelligent systems. I mean, let's imagine that the United States government were trained in emotional intelligence. What would be different?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Imagine if CEOs of big companies were trained in emotional intelligence. How might those companies operate? The same thing applies to school systems and families. And so my vision is that we have, an emotionally intelligent society. When you do this in a school, what you see are things that you care about. Kids get more developed skills. I mean, they're better at dealing with their emotions, which leads to them doing better in academics, which leads to them having better quality friendships, which leads to the school having less bullying and a more positive climate, which leads to teachers being less burnt out and stressed, which leads to teachers being better instructors because they can spend more time teaching as opposed to kind of dealing with all the kids' feelings. And so the list goes on in terms of the benefits.
Yeah. So how did the framework of Ruler come about? And if you could just spend a moment explaining a little bit about the Ruler framework itself.
Yeah. So, before we came on screen, we were talking about like our backgrounds a little bit in emotional intelligence. And It's funny because when I graduated from college, I pulled my uncle out of retirement, he was a teacher who was who saved my life when I was a kid. I had a lot of stress and a lot of bullying and even abuse as a kid. And my mother's brother just came into my life at the right time with the right demeanor, with the right skill. And I share that with you because, I had my Uncle Marvin, and then my life got better as a teenager. I went to college, and then in college I was kind of like, what am I going to do with my life? And I went into therapy, and I'm sitting in the therapist's office, and there is this Time magazine, 1995, EQ matters more than IQ. And I'm like mesmerized by this article because it just reminded me of my childhood when my uncle was supporting me in developing the skills of emotional intelligence, which weren't called that, by the way, because it wasn't invented then. So I'm like, where did this article come from? There's this book called Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. Now, Dan, at that point in 1995, was a journalist for the New York Times, and he was covering all this research. And the book was clear that he didn't invent the concept, but these 2 psychologists did. One's name was Peter Salovey, one's was Jack Mayer. So I reached out to both of them. They both accepted me, gave me meetings. They had lunch with both of them. Peter was a professor at Yale. Jack was a professor at the University of New Hampshire. giving you a little too much information here.
No. It's just very interesting. Continue,
And
please.
and so I go to Yale to meet with Peter, and he's like, "You're a nice guy, but you're definitely not getting into graduate school here." And he didn't say it quite like that, but I didn't have the right test scores. I didn't have the right pedigree. I didn't grow up
Yeah.
academically oriented. My
Yeah.
father was an air conditioning repairman. I didn't even know what Yale was until I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
I would never have thought of applying there as an undergrad. And I was grandiose I probably would not have survived at that university. Well, I'm a professor there now, so.
Yeah, I was going to say, wow, you've really changed the tables, man.
So he said, meet my friend Jack, who is at the University of New Hampshire. So I go up to New Hampshire. Jack's a great guy, and he gives me early acceptance. And so I guess I'm getting my doctorate here. And so I studied with Jack, and then eventually went to Yale to work with Peter as a postdoc. That was now 23 years ago.
Wow.
And then was very fortunate that transitioned into a professorship, and now I'm a tenured professor. But that took a long time. And just because I'm sharing that with you, not because of anything other than I was very blessed to have studied with the two guys who wrote the theory.
Oh my God.
One is a PhD advisor, one is a postdoc advisor. And so Ruler comes out of that model. It's not my model. It's a revision, if you want to call it that, of the original theory. And so Jack and Peter, have written a lot of articles that emotional intelligence is about how we reason with and about our emotions. And they had a framework about these different sets of skills. And so as I was doing more and more research, I felt we could kind of parse out the domains of emotional intelligence using the Ruler framework, and it was cleaner to talk about. So the first skill is recognizing emotions. It's self-awareness. How am I feeling? What's going on in my brain and body? And then I'm trying to read your emotions. How are you feeling? Understanding of emotion. Why am I feeling that way? What's causing my feelings? And the same for you. Why are you feeling the way you're feeling? Labeling emotions, having that precise vocabulary as we spoke about earlier. Knowing how and when to express emotions with different people across culture and context, that not everybody shows emotions the same way. There are gender differences, there are racial differences, there are cultural differences. And then the final R of Ruler is the regulation of emotion, which is, okay, so what do I do with these feelings? Do I keep them or do I shift them? And so that's the framework of Ruler. And kind of, it came out of I read this kind of book that was a popularized version of emotional intelligence, found the two scientists, and then kind of built my career after that.
That's an incredible story. Thank you for sharing that. When you look at Ruler, 5 different definitions, recognize, or words, principles. Which one seems to be the most difficult for people to understand and actually implement it and use it in their life?
It's the last one. And hence, as you know, because you said you had read my first book, Permission to Feel.
Yeah.
And during the pandemic, it was really interesting. Permission to Feel is making the case for why we should all take our emotions seriously.
Yeah.
Their information, their data, and all that kind of background on it. And the application of the global concept to life, school, relationships, work. And then I was, the pandemic hit. I thought, Mark, you're the director of the Center for Emotional Intelligence. You've written all these articles.
No pressure.
No pressure. And I had moments where I was very dysregulated, including I gained 20 pounds during the first year of the pandemic. It's I used to be, I'm like an exercise instructor. And I'm like, what am I doing? I'm eating Thai food every night, curry and dumplings. And I'm like, what am I doing with my life? And then my mother-in-law moved in with us because of a complicated issue. And she was driving me crazy. And then we got into these huge fights. And then I would go to bed at night thinking what is happening? And I realized I stunk, at regulating. And then I was getting all these emails from people around the world, like I'm in the supermarket and someone touched me and I'm going to die. And just people were going nuts. And I'm like, how come people can't regulate? What has happened that people, are freaking out so badly? In the schools I was working in, there was like death threats, it's like crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And like, you can't have a conversation. You have to write a death threat email. I mean, it's really nuts. And I'm like, all right, I got to figure this regulation bucket out. So I decided to write this whole book on regulation. And it was the best thing I ever did because it was so healing for me. Because I went through every possible area in the scientific literature around healthy regulation.
Yeah.
And it really helped me, again, come up with a new model to help people think about it from believe it or not, the first strategy is permission to feel.
Okay. Makes sense.
You got to accept
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm feeling this emotion. It's not the end of the world. It's okay. Then you got to know how to label your feelings, and then lots of other strategies. But I would put if I were like, take my whole bank account and someone said, well, you're going to go to the casino and bet. My bet would be that emotion regulation is probably above all other constructs in life, the most important.
Could you give me an example of that?
Well, let me ask you, in your career, have you worked for other people?
Yes.
Have you ever worked for someone who is not skilled at regulating emotions?
Absolutely. Quite often.
And when you think about those managers or leaders that you work for who are emotionally unintelligent, like, could you imagine having to be with them your whole career?
Yeah, that's why I started my own business. Absolutely. That was it.
It's it. So there you go. It's like, it is difficult to be around these people. You got to walk on eggshells. You got to either unpredictable, you say one thing, they get triggered, they can't have a difficult conversation. So they ignore, they suppress, they deny, they drink alcohol, they yell, they scream, they stomp their feet.
Yeah.
I mean, the stories that I hear, are crazy in terms of, how uncomfortable it is to be around someone who is not skilled.
Yeah. I can give you a little story.
Please.
Get out of college, got into sales. I worked for an organization, and my manager, he told me I was a failure because I could only get 2 closes out of 10. Every time I made a proposal, I could only close 2 out of 10 organizations. And he kept telling me, you're a failure. Why are you doing this? You're never going to be good at this. I'll never forget this. And that bled over. That belief became my identity. And I thought, well, I'm going to be an average person and I'm never going to succeed. And why am I even doing this? I don't know what else I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden I interviewed, and I'll mention the name here because I love the company. It's IBM. I interviewed them decades ago. The manager said, you're closing 2 out of 10. I said, yeah. He goes, I'll bet I can get you to 3 or 4. And I immediately looked at the guy and I thought, this guy's not talking to me the same way. Something's different here. So immediately I got a sense of hope, emotion.
Yeah.
I got excited. I actually definitely said, I got to sell this guy. I got to work for him. As we went through the conversation, he said, I told you you could do 3 to 4. I actually think once in a while I can get you at 50% close rate.
Mm-hmm.
He kept telling me how good I could be. I ended up working for IBM. I devoted my life to that guy, and he was a mentor in many respects in my life. He changed my life, as you said your uncle did.
Yeah.
And it was because he changed my emotions, got me to believe something different. So my message would be, it works, and what you're doing is invaluable. Tell us a little bit more about the framework of dealing with feeling, your new book. When exactly will that be coming out?
You can order it now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It comes out officially September 16th, but it's on all the bookseller websites.
Okay.
Well, firstly, I'd kind of get into why didn't we learn this stuff? And I think it's really interesting. I think at present, we are addicted to the quick fix. It's just so much easier to just drink an extra alcoholic beverage, or just ignore it. It's just easier. And I don't want to put the effort into it. then I go into permission to feel, our mindsets about emotions. And so I've done a lot of research since I wrote my book, Permission to Feel, on the concept of permission to feel. And I think what you'll appreciate is that, when we're working on ourselves, if we can just kind of be better listeners to our emotions,
Mm-hmm.
approach them with less judgment, and have a bit more self-compassion, it goes a really long way.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
by the way, when you interview, which I've done this research now with thousands upon thousands of people, and I ask them to describe the people they want to be around, never does anybody say brilliant or smart or a fixer or a problem solver, high SAT scores, perfect grade point averages. Nobody wants the Yale mindset. What they want are people who are non-judgmental, who are good listeners, who show empathy and compassion.
Yeah. And they feel like they belong.
Completely.
Yeah.
That's
That's
what we're
what
looking
makes,
for. Everybody's looking for
excellent.
that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
And then I go into labeling, and I give lots of examples of building vocabulary, and just want to plug that I also have created an app that's available for free called How We Feel.
Mm-hmm.
I was blessed to have a partnership with the co-founder and former CEO of the company Pinterest, and he and his team and I and my team built this app. We have 3 million people that use it now.
Wow.
And it's all about teaching emotional self-awareness and other things too, which is it's been really well received. So check that out. And then I go into all the different other buckets, like we talked about earlier, the cognitive bucket. It's a big bucket. There are amazing cognitive strategies that we can use to manage our emotions. Relationships really matter. It's a big factor in terms of dealing with emotions. Do you have that trusted person that you can just talk to about it?
Mm-hmm.
But then there's some surprising things. I cover a lot of the science of nutrition and sleep and physical activity, and how those are factors that either can help or get in the way of healthy regulation. Some really great studies that I cover in there. And then another big piece of it is something that is kind of a cognitive strategy, but it's a specific tool that I co-created with one of my colleagues, Robin Stern, called the meta moment.
Mm-hmm.
And the meta moment is a tool that helps people become the best version of themselves. And I'll say, one thing, and I have to give credit. So what I did do, I was very lucky. This is like talking about pandemic. I'm on Instagram, like doing doom scrolling, and this one, online fitness trainer, just his messaging was really good. And he's like, if you want to transform your body, DM me now. And I was like I was in the right place at the right time for him.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I want to work out. And so, I was able to hire this guy and really helped me quite a bit. And, but one thing he said to me that was fascinating was he said, Mark, you'll no longer need me when you see yourself as a person who works out.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you identify
Mm-hmm.
as someone
Identity.
who exercises, who is into physical fitness. And I sat with that for a long time because I like my martial arts. I like to swim, but I never liked to pump iron. Like I just find it boring. Now I've been doing it for 4 years, and I'm like, I actually cannot, I have to do my 4 workouts. Otherwise I really am like, I'm like angry with myself.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sharing that with you because I applied that same concept to emotion regulation. Imagine if all people identified as people who were emotionally
Mm-hmm.
skilled.
Mm-hmm.
Could you imagine what
Mm-hmm.
would be different?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No question.
And that's my goal, is I want to help people through books and trainings and other things to see themselves as emotionally skilled.
Yeah. Yeah. I think AI is going to help you do that.
I hope
Because
so.
I think the disruption that it will bring to businesses will force people to say, how do I interpret, but how do I manage myself through this?
Yeah.
because managing technology will be a totally new experience for people. How do I collaborate with technology? Today, we don't even think about it, but we're going to have a technology that in some respects will be smarter than ourselves. So we say, how do I collaborate with this?
Well, I want to add to that, which you've made me think about, which is that I want the people who are running AI companies to be trained in emotional intelligence to ensure that the products they're building are helping people, not hurting people.
Yeah. Yeah. And to carry on with what you're saying, you're going to have to do that same thing with middle management, because they are going to have to do that with their agents to make sure they're ethical,
Correct.
not going off the wire, so to speak, leaving the company ethics and culture behind.
Correct.
So,
And I think I just want to say something about like that, because I think you're right. And you're talking really kind of in the business world.
mhm.
But, most people, not everybody, but most people are going to want to have a partner, be in a relationship. Some are going to procreate and have
Oh,
kids. And AI, if you want AI to raise your kid, don't have a kid. If you want to make love to a chatbot, then, go see a therapist.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm
Because you
being,
need to.
sorry for being so blunt, but like we need like our relationships are going to be even more important.
Yeah. Mark, this has been a fabulous conversation. I think what you are doing is so important and necessary for the advancement of business, in particular in the next 3 years, 5 years. AI is going to be your proving ground,
Yeah.
where you will have the opportunity to do that. And I would love to be able to help you Guidewise in any way we can, because
Thank
it's
you.
that important. What does the future look like for you, Mark, personally?
For me personally, a lot of people ask me that, like when I wrote my first book, they're like, "What's next?" And now this book, "What's next?"
Hmm.
And for me, obviously I did write another book, but it's always going deeper and deeper into the same thing. Like
Hmm.
we have an implementation problem in our country,
Hmm.
and meaning that it's an implementation problem because, people read a book and then they forget about the book. And, we've got to figure out how to make emotional intelligence a permanent part of education and in businesses and in relationships, so that people are continuously developing these skills. And so my dedication is to that, is to figuring out how to create long-term sustainability.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you're familiar with the concept of servant leadership, and that
Mm-hmm.
came out, I believe, in the 50s, and that was the gray flannel suit identity of what you needed to do to be successful. That's what we have to replicate today. You need to, and say, this is the new definition of what it is to be a business leader and make a contribution to the world that's meaningful, helps other people, and is financially rewarding also.
For sure.
So if people or someone wants to talk to you, what's the best way to contact you?
Yeah. I think the best thing is I have a website, which is my name, Marc with a C, MARC, Brackett, BRACKETT.com. You can learn about my books and the podcast, which is also called Dealing with Feeling. And I'm in social media, Instagram, LinkedIn. But and my website brings you to the Center for Emotional Intelligence, to the app, to all things that I do.
Well, thank you very much. This has been a stimulating and exciting conversation for me emotionally. I love what you're doing. I love your work.
Thank you.
It is so valuable and important today. And I pray that this isn't the last time I talk to you.
I appreciate that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for watching this episode of Implementors. If you found this conversation valuable, please click the like button. It helps others facing similar challenges discover and benefit from these conversations. We also welcome your insights and reflections, so please share your thoughts in the comments. We truly value thoughtful engagement from leaders like you. If these conversations resonate with the work you're doing, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell icon to stay updated on future episodes. And if someone in your network would benefit from this dialogue, consider passing it along. Great implementation and execution always starts with great conversations. And at the end of the day, ideas are just the beginning. It's implementation and execution that drives meaningful results. So thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time. And as always, stay grounded, stay curious, and keep implementing.